The root assumption of all geophysics and geology. I wrote this paper back in 2013. It's a basic paper that I want people to understand. It's very, very simple to understand, and it leads us to why things are the way they are. It's sort of a quasi-history lesson, if you will. Here I wrote, the most basic assumption in all of geophysics and geology is the consensus that the Earth has always been solid and liquid rock. The reality is that the Earth was not always solid liquid rocks. It was a giant ball of plasma and gas much earlier in its life, much larger than its current diameter. The root assumption in all of geophysics and geology that the Earth was always solid liquid rock was because of this reasoning and this reasoning alone. The Earth is solid liquid now, so it probably was always solid and liquid. Basically, this is called uniformitarianism. It means that things that change on the Earth happen over a very, very long period of time. So they assumed, since it's like this now, that it was like this 1,000 years ago, that it was like this 1,000,000 years ago, and 1,000,000,000 years ago. But then they jump off the cliff because, well, how do they know what happened 1,000,000,000 years ago? They didn't. It was an assumption. It's a main root assumption that needs to be corrected. The Earth was plasma first, and then a gas before it was liquid and solid, meaning its solid and liquid structure now has lower enthalpy, but being that we have observed many thousands of gas stars and many billions of plasmatic stars, then Earth was probably one of those, which is philosophically sound. With this new assumption in place, the vast majority of closely held theories taught by establishment disintegrate, such as plate tectonics. Plate tectonics was simply rooted in an assumption that was never questioned. Now that the most taken for granted assumption is fixed in the geosciences, we can start repairing them literally from the ground up. And I even went as far as to find where this assumption popped up. It says here, Petrologic Studies, a volume to honor A.F. Buddington, November 1962. History of Ocean Basins, H.H. Hess, Princeton University, Princeton, New Jersey. The abstract here says, I don't know if you guys can read, I'm going to zoom in on it. Hang on. For purposes of discussion, certain simplifying assumptions are made as to initial conditions on the Earth soon after its formation. So in other words, its formation takes up a very little bit of time, boom, magic, Earth formed, and then it became solid liquid rock and stayed like that for billions of years. That's where they were going with this. It is postulated that it had little in the way of an atmosphere or oceans, and that the constituents for these were derived by leakage from the interior of the Earth in the course of geologic time. So basically, they have the Earth clumping together, okay, and then it's solid liquid rock during its formation, and then everything else just oozed out of the center like a giant, I'm not going to say that word. It's kind of gross. But anyways, here it says, postulated, in other words, assumed that it had little in the way of an atmosphere or oceans. Now, in the theory I'm working on, stellar metamorphosis, the Earth had a very, very, very thick atmosphere, and even at one point during its evolution, the entire constituent, all the matter in the Earth was completely ionized. It was a full plasma. All the constituents of all the matter on the Earth, including the iron core, to the mantle, to the crust, to the atmosphere it has right now, everything was completely ionized. Very, very, very early in the Earth's history. So this assumption Mr. H.H. Hess makes that Earth had no atmosphere or oceans is patently false inside of the stellar metamorphosis theory, because the atmosphere is formed as the star cools and shrinks, and the oceans are formed as the star cools and shrinks. I've gone over that in another video. But basically, here we are. Here is the reason why we believe the things that we believe in inside of the geosciences. Earth was always rock and minerals. It was never gas and didn't have an atmosphere, and the oceans oozed out like a giant. Yeah. Well, there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and link this on the bottom of this video, and if anybody has any comments to make, feel free.